Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Mid-Curve Podcast. We are here. We are a group of degenerates, traders, investors, all sorts of variety of definitions of ourselves. It's wonderful, wild world of Web3 and crypto. My name is Funky Donk. I am part of the Mid-Curve Discord and head of this, or I shouldn't say head of, part of this podcast. And we're here on a weekly basis to talk about everything. I'm going to go around our panel, our normal panel. We don't have a guest today. Have everybody do the now very short, very succinct introduction of themselves. Really quickly about myself. I am a media person who fell into this space and now doesn't understand what he's doing. And also spent as I said, just told everybody, I've spent the last couple hours generating a bunch of old people on Stable Diffusion. So I'm artificially generated old people. So that is what my day-to-day is like right now. Eric, you want to introduce yourself real fast?
Yeah, so I'm Eric, former traditional finance professional, now full-time Web3 degenerate. I also just want to mention that Funky never mentions this, but he has 3 Emmys. He's a 3-time Emmy winning writer, and yeah, he does.
I thought he was Emmy nominated. He's Emmy winning.
Yeah, I've won 3 Emmys and I've been nominated for I might have been nominated for like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 Emmys.
You should really open with that.
Yeah.
The Emmys that I won, I never like to like shout off because they're kind of like they're interactive Emmys. They were for stuff I did with interactive digital media stuff, so that's fine. But I was nominated. We were nominated for writing for a bunch of times, for show a bunch of times, and things like that. So it's been a fun.
Wow, cut that last part out. We need to have the fine print.
That's fine. All right, Eric, get into this. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Eric, former traditional finance professional. Spent just a little under of a decade in the world of traditional finance. Now I do JPEGs and coins.
Great. Salty, how about yourself? Introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Salty, engineer, science, academic researcher person. I've been in crypto for a while and now NFT and DeFis.
Great. And Grant?
Hey guys, I'm Grant. I come from the traditional consulting world. Fell ass backwards into NFTs a couple years ago. And now I spend a couple hours every weekend with you guys.
Great. Okay, let's jump in. We always love to start this podcast by kind of getting a single word descriptor of what the market is like so far. I'm going to start with somebody slightly different. I'm going to start with Salty this week. Salty, what's your one word for the market?
Well, I'll take the fun one, and I'll say governance is my word for the week. I was thinking about amateur hour or something, too, because there's been a bunch of silly stuff this week. But let's go with, oh, God, I'm governing. Yeah,
so crazy.
Funky, you introduced yourself as as like the head of this crew or something. So I believe now we need to start a DAO and publish a token, take a vote to ratify whether that's true. Because I don't agree.
Yeah,
I only
there you
have
go.
1% of tokens. So I know.
Yeah, I've already issued the tokens, and they're all in my wallet right now. So
recently mid-curve DAO.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you know this. Yeah, I don't know. Governance, ARB. Yeah, we talked about ARB a lot last week, and we'll talk more this week. But
well, we could talk more about this week too. Okay, Grant, what about you? What's your one word for the market this week?
I guess Salty kind of took mine. I'll just say Caesar because he's the one who ended democracy in Rome.
All right, great. Eric, what about you?
Loss, because I think like all of this, back and forth on governance and also what constitutes breaking the law, it just kind of reminds me that 95% of people in this space don't understand how the legal system works, and if they were ever on the wrong side of the law, will probably end up in prison.
Oh, okay, great. That sounds good. Why not? We should all be very aware that there's a possibility of prison if we're part of this.
I think it's important if you're gonna deal game coins, you should like have a basic understanding of what constitutes securities fraud and insider trading.
Yep.
It's very clear that people don't understand how any of this works.
Yep, 100%.
Have we checked with a lawyer to make sure this podcast isn't itself a security? I feel like we should.
We should probably get some advice from somebody. Yeah.
Cut that out.
You actually can.
There's a
I
lot.
know.
We're cutting a lot of this out already. It seems like it's a very strange podcast. Okay, let's jump in here. Oh, I should give my word for the week. My word for the week, I think, is I don't want to. Confused is the wrong. I think I'll whatever. Fuck it. I'll say confused. I think confusing is something I feel often in general in this space, but I think particularly now I feel confused because I'm having a really hard time getting a gauge on what is going on because I think that like it feels like to me there's no consistency, and maybe it's just that this is the chop of 2023 and we're gonna just chop around all the time, but like there doesn't seem to be a consistent narrative to anything other than what we'll get into that is kind of like shit's gotten fucked up again and again, but like I just feel like there's a level of, it's not chaos because chaos I think would be crazier. I think SBF, Luna, that stuff is chaos. Obviously SBV was chaos, but like it just feels confusing to me. I think it's one of those things where it's hard for me to know right now, should I be pulling everything out of NFTs, or are NFTs something that are going to work now, or is alt season coming for real, or is it not? Is the stock market going to go up or down? I feel confused. So that's my word of the week. Why don't we get into what it seems like everybody's excited to talk a little bit about, which is this kind of like weird ass ARB scenario. ARB, obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about last week. ARB, the token drop from Arbitrum, and there's been some. I guess I would go as far as call it FUD. But Eric, why don't you give us the TLDR on what the scenario is going on right now?
Yeah, so post the establishment of the DAO, the Arbitrum DAO, the team, the foundation put forward the first official proposal, which proposed ring fencing about 750 million tokens allocated to the DAO, which were just a little north of $1 billion, to make special purpose grants to grow the Arbitrum ecosystem. The special grants would be overseen by basically 3 selected signers that would serve as basically the de facto grant givers until they were replaced via a governance vote. And then you also have this 12-person Arbitrum Security Council to kind of oversee other aspects of the DAO. I think that the initial issue with this and why it caused so much blowback was one, 750 million tokens is a fuckload of tokens. There was really very little explanation in the original proposal as to what the process is to making these special grants, what the criteria was, who had oversight into how the grants were made. And so it just, I think it just looked like, hey, hang on here. You said 4.2 billion tokens were going to basically be given earmark for the community, but it seems like this is sort of a little bit of clawback where you're basically giving the foundation giving itself back these tokens that they can then use with little to no oversight. I think the other issue is at the same time, people watching the activity on chain noticed that the tokens had already been moved into a secondary wallet, and 50 million of the tokens then subsequently were transferred out into other wallet addresses, and some of the tokens were actually sent to Binance where they were sold. And so it was like, at this point, there's just a lot of fervor. I think there were a bunch of some good takes, some bad takes, but it becomes very clear that the proposal is going to face backlash. And over the course of yesterday, a lot of delegates come out against the proposal, to the point where it becomes very, very clear that the community does not want this to pass. And even though the way that the Arbitrum team structured this was a temperature check proposal to be followed by an official vote, there was enough, I think, backlash in the community that made the proposal untenable. So in the morning, what they come out and say is this is kind of a proposal, but it's really not a proposal because we already did it, so we just want you to ratify it. Which obviously
they call it a ratification. We're gonna put a
ratification
on chain.
This is they're we're gonna give you some clarity. It's actually a ratification on chain. And their reasoning was like, look, it's a chicken and egg problem because you can't just start a foundation out of nowhere. There are significant startup costs on the legal side. There are major expenses. When you launch a token, you have to be able to do things with you have to be able to give loans to market makers to make a market for your token. And what they've asked for as a foundation is not out of line with what Optimism and Polygon have done for their own foundations without any sort of governance oversight, right? Which is all true, but the problem is that like you can't launch a token where the sole utility is governance and then launch this proposal that had the illusion of governance but no governance whatsoever, and have it be tied to effectively like pointed to give it like 7.5% of the total token supply, which is just is just kind of really really terrible planning. And so obviously that you know completely blows up Twitter, and now you have all of the CT, the CT the midwits come out and say, "Oh, what is the reasoning for this token? This is bullshit. Like this token is worthless." So all of the rats are now jumping off the ship. And then finally, I think the Arbitrum team basically comes out, issues a mea culpa, and says, "Hey, we fucked up. We've taken the community feedback to heart. We're gonna pull this proposal because it's obviously like not the way to go about this. And we're gonna segregate. What we're gonna do is we're gonna break this proposal down into multiple proposals that we will put up for governance votes. And at the same time, we're going to provide a lot more information and detail on how special grants are done, what the process looks like, and to get the community comfortable that there is going to be accountability here. Oh, and by the way, we're probably going to put the 750 million tokens in a 4-year vest, which did not exist before, and that was also the cause of a lot of heartburn.
Right.
So I think this is like one of those situations, just a stark reminder that like on-chain governance is like real world governance is often when you peel back when you really pierce the veil, just a fucking joke. It's really like just not done very well. And in most cases, the people, the majority of token holders involved in who should have a stake in these governance decisions either aren't aware or are so stupid that they just have a complete misunderstanding of like the issues at hand, why that matters, which kind of goes back to like the fundamental reason why Web2 companies, especially publicly traded firms, don't put forward governance proposals when they want to do something. They just appoint people to do it, and the business operates. And if things are bad, shareholders can put forward a vote to remove the CEO and replace them. But if things are good, then nobody really bothers, and stakeholders aren't involved in day-to-day decisions. And there's a reason for that because like implementing governance in what is a profit-oriented business is generally speaking a really bad fucking idea. It does not work, and we're learning this in real time. So
okay, so hold on, wait a second. Let me dig in on that because I think we should all talk a little bit about this. Because am I not wrong? But is this not one of the number one reasons that people believe in the idea of crypto as a whole? Like, is it not the idea that in some way, and I'm not saying that I believe in this, but I'm saying I have been told from day one of awareness of this sort of world that the idea of crypto, the promise of it is a decentralized financial system that has the ability to be tracked and the ability to have conceivably people to vote on it together. That is one of the tenets of crypto, correct?
I'm gonna answer as the crypto historian here and push back on that and say that no. And in fact, it's kind of a recent like hyper meme
Oh, this is good. I want to know this. I'm curious about this. Okay, this is
So
interesting.
early in Ethereum's life, there was the DAO hack, and people were talking about DAOs, and there were some very nascent ones. And before DAOs, what were they calling them? DAX. I think BitShares or EOS had DAX. So this idea is not new, but it was never like a foregone conclusion, and it was never like the central idea. It was never like everyone in Ethereum and these competing L1s back in the day and Bitcoin, they were all like, this is the way we should govern. This is what trustlessness means. This is what decentralization crypto means. That was not the case. And somehow, like, I was just like keeping up very loosely with crypto for a few years when things were very boring between the ICO mania and DeFi. And when I came back into the world of DeFi, I mean, everything and everyone's obsessed with DAOs as it's like a foregone conclusion that we all just assume this is a good thing. And I'm like, man, this was a real culture shift, a real culture shift. And then a huge amount of people have joined since DeFi summer and the NFT times. And all of them kind of started on that same footing. But I will say for sure, no, especially before like 2020, it was not a trivial thing that everything should be a DAO. The DAOs were even good. Vitalik, other thinkers in the space have written about this, and years and years ago that it's DAOs are not like a good thing, and that's not a given. The promises of crypto have to do with trustlessness, with voluntary interaction, with decentralization, with cryptographic proof. That doesn't have anything to do necessarily with an organization that distributes direct democracy style votes on chain. That could be one instantiation of it. And today it's become the dominant one because it's stupid as hell and it's easy to implement on snapshot.org.
But by the way, also, you know what it is a fucking narrative. This is the thing I think we have to be aware of.
Dude.
It's just that's what I mean. It's like it's a thing people can say that it does. And I think this is something that's really important. And when you say something you think that is something that it does, it allows people to talk about it in a certain way. And that's what I kind of getting at. I think your hyper narrative aspect of this is right. Is maybe not the beginning of cryptos, but it is the thing people talk about a lot now. And it seems so dumb when you look at this, right?
There has always been pushback from very smart people who actually build these tools against the idea of, I don't know, just give everybody a vote on chain. But then everyone who built the protocols or the things weren't quite as smart as them. So they were just like, yeah, let's just do that. Sure. I can't think of anything better. And that's where we are.
Literally, like, to do the George like Carlin routine, right? Like adapt that routine. Imagine the dumbest fucking person you know, right? Now imagine that person is empowered with the veil of some relative form of anonymity on the internet, and he or she now has direct influence over something that might affect your financial future. Like, who the fuck?
Is the rest of the bit imagine the dumbest person you know, and then imagine that 50% of the people are dumber than him or something?
No. Imagine it. Well, it's imagine the dumbest person you know, and then imagine that try to imagine someone that is 4 times dumber, and then go on the Arbitrum Discord, and you will be like, wow, that was way too optimistic of a read. These are like refrigerator temperature individuals here. A temperature IQ individuals here. It's that bad,
I mean,
it's
what the problem with Web 2 was too, by the way. If you remember, this is a lot of the same issues you had with things like Dig or other things like that, which were like the wisdom of the crowds, which really isn't that wise. This is the issue you run into. It's not just something that's Web 3 straight.
People love Dig because, Dig died and kind of became Reddit. But man, that's an solid old reference too. I mean,
well, look, there's a reason that the direct correlation between mob rule and pogroms tend to be very high, which is why we tend to avoid those situations. But governance and DAOs at large can often, especially when they happen inside of these Discord echo chambers, can really just it is literally just mob rule, and it's a witch hunt, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like there were very, very credible critiques as to why the Arbitrum team fucked this up, because realistically, if they had just come out and said at the inception point of the token, hey, we have to fucking do this because this is you need a foundation like this to ensure longevity of the chain, to ensure the health of the ecosystem. It is not up for debate because all of our competitors have done it, so we're gonna fucking do it. Like nobody would point the finger, right? And so this is kind of like but their fault. I think their fault is they half-assed this, where they're sort of like, we have to do this, but we at least want to create the perception that this is going through the governance process. And it seems very reasonable, and so we're gonna do it, but we're not really gonna communicate too much about what we were doing and what we've done so far. And I think that was just a major mistake, and they under like you misunderstood. Like, you can't half-ass this, and to full-ass governance, well, it's actually very, very difficult.
Yeah, Grant, what's your take on this? You've been a little quiet here, but I'm assuming you're on the same page as all of us.
I'm all governed out. I'm all democracy out. I just want
Yeah.
sheer iron, a rolling iron fist in front of me. I think it's just sheer stupidity. Like, how hard is it to communicate directly, or leak to a couple accounts that, yeah, most of the funds were for Wintermute, who is a reputable market maker, to make our token liquid off chain and on chain. How hard is it? I mean, you fucking hired SizeChat to do this, right? To make CTB on your side, which is like not difficult when you're handing out this amount of free money. And yes, it still is a good amount of free money, despite the fact that it's fallen a little bit, right? It's literally like, it didn't need to be. Yeah, it didn't need to fall through like the theater of fake democracy here. It's just just explain to people that the foundation is a different entity from Off-Chain Labs, is a different entity from the rest of the whole charade, right? And you need these types of expenditures in order to attract real businesses, real projects, whoever else to come build on your L2, right? It's not it's not super complicated, and yet they kind of butchered it, and I just it's frustrating because this entire let's get this off the ground with an airdrop, and let's get real builders in the space has taken like longer than others, right? Like Optimism, Matic, whoever else, you name it. Like, yes, the tech stack is better, but it's just taking you a lot longer. So you should be, in theory, executing flawlessly, and it's not happening. And of course, we're in a liquid bear market where there's no other narratives to focus on. So of course we're gonna thread about it and talk about it, right?
Yeah, and now you have to put up with like Adam Cochran talking about, oh, what's the value of a governance token if you can't govern it? I was like, oh, you dumb motherfucker! Like, nobody owns this because it's a governance token. Like, the governance token is a meme. Like, every individual with a half a brain and some some sense of wanting to make money understands that, yes, it is quote unquote a governance token today, because for regulatory tokens, you literally cannot call it anything else or promise it anything else. But like 5 years from now, when when actually adoption grows, sequencer fees go up, and overall like the regulatory framework becomes much more amenable to crypto, hopefully, then there is the question of the fee switch. This is why Uniswap still commands the Uniswap quote unquote governance tokens still commands the value that it does, because there is hope that eventually you're going to get a portion of the economics, right? And it's just such a it's just such bullshit, because it's a fundamental misrepresentation of like basic like basic market dynamics. Like, are you like, okay, if when Tesla makes $1 a share, are you, as a shareholder, are you getting $1 a share? Like, no, you're not, right?
Yeah.
And unless Elon Musk allows it to be, you will never see $1 per share. But it's so your actual right is primarily governance, where you can go and say, hey man, like, give me my $1 per share, or else I'm gonna stir some shit up, which is traditional shareholder activism. And so, like, in the end, you very like this idea that, oh, I have this magic token that's just gonna give me like passive income. That's not what's happening here. right? And so what, people have to understand like what it is that they own, what successful outcomes and unsuccessful outcomes look like. If you're underwriting like $1.10 per token here today, like eventually a couple of years down the road, like what are you really assuming? Like what has to happen for this to work out? Like you have to kind of do the basic work there and get comfortable. Else, it's just like speculation. And then when stuff like this happens, you have no anchor, and so you get tilted. And that's how most people lose money trading, whether it's stocks or coins. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I also think there's something interesting about the piles of these that feel like they happen, and I think it's always an interesting thing to think about, like what people are primed to react as, right? Like, I think it was you just said that, like, we're in the middle of this bear market, so it's like all people have to talk about, but also like we're in the middle of this market where like lots of either stupid people or legitimately corrupt people have done things that have been really, really bad over the last like 6 months. And I think what's interesting is I sure do hope at some point there are some like grown-ups that come into this space in a big way. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that it's when I hear about things like this, it just is it like grinds my gears, as they say on the on Family Guy. But like I feel very like perturbed by the idea that shit like this can happen in a space where you're constantly having to defend it. Does anybody feel that way? Does anybody feel like you're in this space and you want it to succeed, and then shit like this goes down and you're like, what the fuck, you guys? It literally was like a what in the fuck is going on sort of scenario.
It's yeah. I think people, like they're like, oh, we want governance. This goes everything in the face of governance and decentralization. And I'm just sitting here like, listen, like the comms suck here. The sequencing is atrocious. They totally fumble the bag on communication. But like, are you really complaining about, the protocol that just gave you free money tokens? Because when where was this fucking outrage when like Maker literally went upgraded their contract just so they could steal money back for one of their big institutional backers?
Yeah.
Which is the type of like one flies completely in the face of like everything decentralization and crypto, and then two is super preferential treatment that other like regular participants in the space would never get, which is kind of the thing that the crypto community rails against in traditional finance. Like, where are your pitchforks? Where are your pitchforks when that happened, right? So I think it's just like, just the space as a whole is just continues to be like kind of super reactionary, without and we all operate out of the Twitter Discord echo chamber where a few of these talking heads basically have, assumed like the mantles of dime store Rush Limbaughs, and they whenever shit like this happens, they stir the animal spirits for engagement.
Yeah, by the way, and that's not just in our world, right? It's not just in the crypto NFT world. It's really across everything. And I think that is something interesting to be aware of, that like this isn't just like the Twitter, like, morons that want out there and they want to, I mean, you look at those fucking spaces, what's his name does now, where he talks about like the COVID stuff. And it's just like, it's just the idea of what people do now and how narrative spread. So yeah, it whatever. It all blows. It's one of those things that's relatively annoying. But so where does this all go from here? You guys generally, do you feel like we are now like this is kind of settled and that we're just going to kind of move through this and ARB will kind of just like settle where it is? Or I don't know. Does anybody have a feeling as like, is ARB fucked for a bit? Grant, what is your take? Are you in ARB or out of ARB right now?
I only traded it personally for like a couple days post drop, but that more has to do with my view of where majors are headed, as opposed to the specific token itself. Obviously, like a disappointing amount of volatility so far for traders both ways, despite the fact that it's undergone some pretty serious FUD for the time being, and I just think it's too early to tell. I think basic summary of it is it's a really promising tech stack. we'll see how the foundation uses the tokens that it's allocated itself, and hopefully it follows in the footsteps of predecessors like Polygon, where it does manage to attract some big name real builders, because that's at the end of the day you're looking to build that TVL for the long term, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, anybody else want to say anything before we move on?
I mean, like, democracy, as messy as this whole and frustrating, infuriating as this whole process kind of works, because at the end of the day, the ARB team did back down from the initial proposal, and they are actually going to break it down into individual proposals and come back to the community with a much more detail and try to actually adhere to the governance process, right? So putting aside the fact that, like, look, I think, like, they had to ring fence these tokens and the formation of the foundation had to be done this way. They are at least attempting to fix it. So you've had, I would like, I don't know if you've had like an impact on the process, which is like, that's kind of what you want in sort of a democratic process, in a democracy, right?
Yeah.
So at least we have that. Like, I don't know how this pertains to price, because to Grant's point, like, I don't really have a strong sense of like where the majors are going to head, especially with the OPEC just kind of telling Joe Biden to fuck off this Sunday. So it's gonna be choppy out there, but the fundamental product is good, right? And before this, a lot of the excitement was around the fact that, like, volumes on ARB were pretty close to flipping L1 volumes, mainnet volumes for on certain days, which again, like, plays into the promise of L2 scaling solution. So the tech actually seems to be doing what it is supposed to do. So I think this is just one of those wait and see situations, but it is like, it is an interesting dynamic where it's like we're now at least like more mature as a space, because we're having discussions around these issues versus, I would say, like 2 to 3 cycles ago, when all of these things were vapor, and like, what did you really have to anchor to outside of hype?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm glad Eric mentioned that, because I think this is actually, although we're talking about it, and if we're talking about you on mid curve, it means you probably fucked up. Although we're talking about it, something actually happened when people expressed their displeasure, which is different than if you own $10,000 of Tesla. You don't get to go sit in the board meeting, like you don't get to go attend the board meetings and express your opinion. But here, a lot of people with small bags expressed a lot of opinions, and actually something happened. So, points for that. And I think Eric gave a good overview of like kind of this space when it comes to these things. And maybe, people do DAOs because they feel like they have to, or it's just some kind of SEC voodoo, and they think like there's going to be better legal positioning if they're a DAO, and that makes them less of a security and whatever this stuff. But it's a good reminder to ourselves, to our listeners, that you think of, like, why are you buying this stuff? Or if you were airdropped it, why don't you sell it immediately? If you really think it's worth millions, or for yourself tens of thousands of dollars, to vote on Snapshot, if you really, really believe that, you should maybe adjust your entry price to be that, and if you don't know why you're owning the coin, okay, well, maybe for trading short-term price action, that's fine. But, it's worth thinking about, why does an L1 have a token if it's not a gas token like Ethereum and ETH, or Bitcoin and Bitcoin? And if so, what do you think that value is today and in 5 years? And if everybody else is playing this really speculative game, and you're playing this game where you think today the voting is all the value, you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah. You're gonna walk away unhappy, I feel like, eventually.
You pizza when people French fries, not gonna have a good time.
Yes.
All right, Salty, just keep in mind that when mid curve token drops, you're gonna send them all to me, right? It's delegation, baby.
I'll delegate.
There will be 50 mid curve tokens. That's the key. We're gonna only have 50 tokens that are issued. It'll be fun. So we'll have to, the vote will actually matter. Okay, let's move on. there's another big story that's been going on.
I'll cut you off, Funky, because I know what the story is, and the story is that Suzu owns a milady now. So, okay, keep going. I know we're
I
gonna
saw
talk
that.
about this all.
Is that a is it PF? Did he PFP it? Is
Yeah,
he
he
fully
did.
go? Oh my
He
It's
god!
on
did.
his Twitter.
He did.
I didn't
Oh
believe
my
it.
god! Oh, milady, what a fucking world we live in, man. This is. I will say, as I'm not a milady fan personally. People can have their own opinions on it, but like I will say that that group has done a remarkable job of like creating their own narrative and creating their own idea of what they were going to represent in this space, and more
Some
power
real
to
schizo shit,
them.
but I
Yes.
just
Yes.
Restaurant in California, and we're gonna get a lady themed chicken joint in somewhere in Asia, wherever Kyle and Sue are.
I just want to. This is Sue's arc that I'm looking forward to. Like how's this gonna play out? I'm ready.
Well, okay, let's move on to another somewhat sketchy individual. Let's talk about Gainzy and what went down here, because I feel like we've got a theme this week, which is like kind of like maybe dummies in general. Like, okay, who can lay out the Gainzy situation within like, I don't know, 2 minutes? Anybody got a quick shot at it?
These are gonna be two of the longest minutes of my life, man.
So basically what happened is somebody looked through the on-chain data and found out that as Gainzy was pumping the Rollbit tokens, he sold 45 million tokens on the back end. All the while, posting on his timeline that, hey, you guys should buy this token. It's fucking awesome, and just shilling the fuck out of it. Gainzy's defense is that he had to sell these tokens on the back end because he was balls long, coins on massive leverage, and so he had to liquidate his holdings to meet margin calls. And that he did nothing illegal, and it wasn't pump and dump because, he sold the tokens below his entry price, so he actually lost a lot of money on the way down as he was liquidating to meet these margin calls. And so the community is kind of, initially like had split, and people have come out in defense of Gainzy. He's like, hey, this is perfectly legitimate. He's a degenerate. He's just meeting margin calls. He's not pumping and dumping because he lost money. And that's kind of where we are. And that's honestly as much as I want to get into like the specifics, because it is so painful.
Yeah.
But here is like newsflash, guys, like you committing securities fraud or breaking the law does not require that you make money. It is all about intent. And that the legal precedents for that are actually very, very clear. Because before SAC, the biggest insider trading conviction to date was relating to the conviction of Rajaratnam of Gowling Group, which was at one point, I think, like a $16 billion hedge fund. And what they ended up nailing him on was his insider trading around the shares of AMD, where he had insider information but lost money. In that situation, the fact that he lost money on these insider trades was completely irrelevant, because all the NYAG had to prove was that there was basically an intent to trade on material non-public information and profit from it.
Right.
So that is something that, like, when you kind of look at the situation with Gainzy, or you look at future situations where like people are like, well, I'm not pumping and dumping or not doing anything illegal because, hey, I lost money. That is not actually like a defense that holds up in court. And the thing is, Gainzy is an ex-derivatives trader. So he worked for a bank that was subject to fairly strict compliance requirements. So he understands this. This is not like he knew what he was doing. And so I think this just goes to like the relative immaturity of the space, and the fact that like these basic legal concepts are not well understood.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to the same sort of scenarios where whether they're not understood, or there's this idea that because we're in this, world that we live in, that they can be, run around in some form, right? Because if Gainzy does, I didn't realize Gainzy has like actual financial background. So like there's an awareness of people in that space who know this stuff. So to me, it has more to do with like, this sounds like and highfalutin, but it's almost like where's the moral high ground in this? Like my other question about Gainzy, and Eric, you may maybe know this, is like, is he operating in the States or is he operating internationally somewhere?
I mean, he says he's offshore, but he spends enough time across like Miami and New York that
Right.
again, it's a gray area. I'm not really gonna pretend to know what his legal jurisdiction situation is, but presumably he's an American citizen. So
Right.
so if he's breaking the law somewhere, he's breaking the law, right? But again, it's just like a sniff test where if you were to do this kind of thing at like a TradFi institution, you would be there would not be a conversation. You would be instantly terminated, and it will probably blacklist these types of compliance violations, and a blacklisting you from the industry. Like it is very, it is very, very clear, and there is not a lot of negotiating for it.
Well, so here's what I'd like to talk about then. And this kind of folds into what we were talking about before. Can you blacklist people from being influencers? Because I think this is what we're talking about, right? And this is where, to fold into what we had talked about briefly before about the idea about how being a quote unquote influencer is not just in crypto, but it's infiltrated in the other places. The issue with Gainzy is that the power that he wields, and this is something I think that is relatively new in the last, like, say 5 to 7 years, right? Since the rise of Twitter and all these other platforms, the power that he wields is the sphere of social influence that of people who listen to him and want to follow along. I don't think mostly following along because he's brilliant, but follow along to try to make money from him, right? So I guess the question ultimately will become, and it's the same thing with what we've talked about with all the other influencers who have come back, Three Arrows, and all the people that have tried to come back and be part of Twitter again. It's that's where the power lies in a lot of ways. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like, will people just stop listening to him? Because, like, that's where the power that he has and the power that he's gotten is from that, I think, more than anything else, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah, once Frankenstein's monster has been put together, it's hard to kill him and put him back, right? In this case, this is just Kobe's hairy little friend.
Yeah.
Who, makes the most of the Twitter algorithm by being alpha or sigma, or whatever the fuck these guys call themselves these days.
It's just a fucking degenerate. It's just like it's spectator art, right? So
he exaggerates everything from what he eats and drinks in a day to what he's trading essentially, and it's just not. I think it's just this degree of sophistication in the space and really the social media age that we live in. I don't think it's hard, right? Because like I've had personal experiences of like people I've come up with in the NFT space, like just take, I'm not even gonna call it a wrong turn because I'm sure they're being paid through the nose by these shady ass, token devs and whatnot. But they just spend their entire life like shilling random bullshit on the timeline, and it's just there's kind of no coming back from that. And I don't know, unless you kind of memory wipe everyone and do something else for the next 5 years.
It's hard to deplatform people, to Grant's point, because as long as they have the audience and there is some unscrupulous player that wants to monetize that audience, like there will be a means to do business. And the regulatory frameworks are not there to really like set like a good precedent as to what's acceptable and what is not.
Well, it's so funny too, because I was just listening to a really good podcast that I like by Derek Thompson on the Ringer Network, in plain English, when he was talking about the things that are coming up with Trump this week, right? And it's like, this is not a political podcast, but obviously there's a massive, massive thing happening this week, this Tuesday. President Donald Trump is going to be booked, and there will be a mugshot of him. But like, this is like the person that was the leader of America is literally being charged with a crime. And the theory is, and I think it's probably true, and this goes to what we were just saying, is that like, he will probably come out of this much stronger in terms of his ability to rally his fans than he did going in, which is fascinating, right? Like in this world where that, like, the idea of being able to be put in through this ringer that there's some sort of like positive side of that in some ways. This is, I feel like I'm losing the track of crypto from this, as much as we're talking about like how this is infecting society, but it's another version of the same thing, right? It feels like the same sort of thing again. It's like, maybe doing crime's not the biggest deal in the world. Maybe it's not the biggest thing. And like, it's like a sliding scale of like how we're looking at, I guess, morality now, which is just such a weird thing.
I think that's a apt comparison because, just as ineffective as Arbitrum's governance to date has been, and maybe people just say, if the organizations look to bear scams, I might as well just follow Gainzy's leveraged, degen betting. It's the same thing as populism in America, right? It's on the rise because people are fundamentally unhappy and there's less money going into their bank accounts every fucking week.
Yeah. By the way, if you follow Gainzy's like leverage trade recommendations, I just get help. I just get help. You got worse. You got more pressing problems to deal with. If that is a rabbit hole that you've gone down to, please seek professional help.
Seek professional help. All right, well, let's shift over really quickly into the NFT space, just because I think there's a few things that are probably worth talking about. The NFT space has been since SVP seems like, and whatever. I know that people have blamed Blur. It's not Blur's fault, but there's been a dip in overall floor prices, right? And we had quite a bit of dip. And it does seem like there's a tiny bit of stuff starting to bubble up again, and it might just be because crypto it really spiked for a bit, and maybe it's settling again around the 1750. Sorry, you want to say crypto? I mean ETH. It's settling around the 1750 to 1850 range, and that's allowing some projects to come through. Like Nakamoto's is a fascinating project, which kind of came out of the blue, and people really got into it, and it's now got a floor price of 0.55. And there are places that people are kind of seeing positive stuff, but I don't get the feeling yet that anybody is like psyched about things. The one place that I think, and this is what I do want to talk about, that it feels like, I'm not shocked by this, but I'm really at least semi-impressed by it. It does seem like Yuga has actually really figured out how to build somewhat of a sustainable business in this place. And when I say this place, I mean the insane world that we all live in, because they're at least pursuing an interesting pathway into stuff that feels like it's not just throwing darts at the wall. And another big piece of news this week, which I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but Daniel Alegre, the CEO, former CEO of Activision, finally started. Yeah. But what's funny is I thought he joined 3 months ago, but he actually officially joined this week. So let's talk a little bit about Yuga. We don't talk a lot about them because they're the dominant force in the space. It seems crazy to talk about them, but Grant, what's your take on how Yuga's doing and kind of like where they're at right now?
It remains to be seen. I think it's just generally a terribly low bar. There's like been two projects that basically established projects, that have basically done something, and the other one is literally, was on Solana last week. They're moving house to an ecosystem that still has some shred of dignity and liquidity left. So it's just not a high bar. I don't know about sustainable business model because I don't see any on-chain data of new buyers coming in, but it's not a high bar, right? Like we talked about this all throughout December and January. Like time is running out for the rest of these projects to keep their holders happy and not kind of running through the walls here.
Yeah.
Are you insinuating that Grant? Are you insinuating that Solana is not a respectable, dignified blockchain?
At this point in time, no. But
I'll have you know, it's very fast when it works. I don't think you realize how fast it is.
Well, I just submitted like 100 no votes to the new Arbitrum proposal in like 2 seconds. So good options.
All right. Well, it's okay. Eric, what about you? What are your thoughts on Yuga right now?
I mean, they have like something. All right. I Grant's right. Like the bar is very low, but I think they have a good approach in terms of, hey, like these trips on the other side are they're taking a while.
Yes, they're
Because
taking a long while.
it takes time to build, I think, a fully immersive experience of that caliber. But that doesn't mean we're not gonna do anything else on the side because we have resources. We're gonna do Legends of Mara. We're gonna do the heavy metal game, and so obviously there was Dookie Dash. So they're kind of just saying like, look, we're gonna experiment and try to have fun with it and figure out what sticks and what doesn't. And if you're part of the ecosystem, you are along for the ride, which at this point it's more than what 90% of the space has offered, right?
Yeah.
And just like DeGods is a good example because like what are they what have they really done? Well, like they haven't outright like fuck their holders or use them as EV marks. Um, I think they did a great job with their ordinals collection and listening to what the market wanted them to do. And then Frank, even though he caught a lot of flack for the migration out to Polygon and mainnet for Utes and DeGods, like it absolutely turned out to be the right call because he is now at the right place at the right time. Like year over year, the top five sort of like if I kind of look at where we were this time last year with regards to top collections that had a 20 plus ETH floor, right? You had BAYC, you had Punks, you had Mutants, you had Azukis, you have Doodles, you had Clonex, right? And you had Moonbirds. And now like with the only two assets of what I just named that still has a 20 plus ETH floor are Punks and Bored Apes. Right.
Yeah.
So there's clearly a gap in the floor. There is a lot of anger and confusion around what is going to happen with clones, moonbirds, and
Doodles.
and doodles. And so I think he has like through instinct like identified that power vacuum and says, hey, like, I galvanize my user base, right? Like people like me, other founders like me. It's time for me to step up and kind of go on the main stage, right? And so it's hard for me to stop this.
I don't want to bring this back again to the theme of the whole podcast, but Frank's another version of that thing, right? Like that's the amazing thing. Like Frank
Yes.
is another version of, and I would say in general, like so as far as I can tell, a good version, a lawful, or maybe not lawful, like a chaotic neutral version of it, but like he's another person who has gotten a very good at managing and raising narrative, right? And it's really interesting to see how like this has become the dominant thing. And like we all know there's a couple people in this space who are not very good at it, right? And again, I think we don't have to name names, but we all know that there are certain founders that really are not very good at controlling a narrative or starting a narrative or understanding how to speak in that way. And I think that Frank is a perfect example of somebody who's good at it. And what's interesting about the Yuga thing to me is that in some ways, the one thing I wanted to kind of mention to Yuga is that Yuga feels like more so than almost all the other projects that it is a little bit more grown up. And I know that like it is, we talked about being a low bar, but just the fact that Daniel Legre's starting now as a CEO, even though I thought he was there for a while, they do seem to have multiple pathways of things they're working on. And it does seem like it's starting to act like a company. Whereas like, so if there's only one version of that, let's call it in the NFT space, and that's Yuga, then Frank is like the best version of all the other versions. And it's an interesting kind of split to see, like it's that idea of like founder driven versus kind of like more mature company in some way. And I think that's the thing that I'm kind of interested in with Yuga right now is that Yuga seems to be starting to kind of move into this next stage. And I think one thing I'll say, I do think it's an important point about Yuga to mention the fact that their next game is just to the other trip we talked about last weekend briefly, but like the other side trip. But the smaller games that they are making, I think, are much more important than anybody's giving them credit for. because I think the smaller games are significant in that they are going to reach different audiences. They're going to be a whole different type of gameplay. And I think also the other thing I mentioned this, I mentioned this on my other podcast, but the thing people should know about Daniel Alegre is that a huge part of Activision Blizzard's business isn't even in the name, but it's King Games, right? I can't remember if we talked about this before here, but King Games is, you know, a massive casual gaming company that's part of Activision Blizzard. And I think it represents 40% of Activision Blizzard's net income, something like that. It's Candy Crush and a bunch of mobile games. If Yuga can unlock that in some form, like that is a really big business model that I don't think has come in a significant way to Web3. I mean, obviously it's what Gabe Leiden is trying to do, I think, but who knows what's going on there. But I do think that's a pretty big deal if they can open it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think like good NFT founders do have to have like that flair, right? The ability to create spectacle. I mean, like, you know, one project that a lot of us like Azuki, like Zagabond does this very well, right?
Yeah.
But everyone has like a different approach. Right. And this is not specific to Web3. Like you can go far back, really like, you know, really far back, like even like Liberace or Little Richard, right? There's like a flair, you know, it's like, look, they were really good artists and musicians, but that flair for you know, the
Showmanship.
unusual-
It's showmanship.
It's a showmanship, right?
Yeah.
You need it. And so like you can't like really begrudge like people for you know, that's I think that's how you have to, that's part of doing business, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that he's able to do this as a very young founder is kind of a credit to the project and not, you know, that doesn't necessarily detract from it.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. Are any of you buying DeGods or Utes to hold? Like, I understand that there was a movement to flip them, even though it's down a little bit now since they've come over to ETH. But like, is anybody buying into Frank? Like, in terms of like, does anybody think that they are assets that are worth holding?
I think difference between Yuga and everyone else was there's never been like a cult of personality around the actual founders, right? Like they're pretty careful to never make themselves the main character, and you know, as bad as the word decentralized now is, thanks to our prior conversations, it truly was like, you know, the build up, at least in the early days of Yuga, was never about one specific holder or one specific person on the team, right? And I think that ultimately is going to be the downfall of DeGods. How, you know, whatever that is. I don't know if it's soon, but I think that's probably their Achilles heel as well, right? Whenever Frank starts to become unlikable by the ETH gang, yeah, I just don't see like a way around that really. But for now, yeah, he's the golden child, right? He's the XYC founder. I think we have quite a few of those now in the ecosystem, and you know, he's the one who hosts the parties with no girls in them, but are still fun enough for all the wannabe frat boys to attend.
Wait, Frank was
I
YC?
Speculate on them.
Yeah, he is.
In the future. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
What? I had no idea. From what? What was his project? Did he have something that came out of there?
Don't remember what it was.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fascinating. I had no idea Frank was YC. I did not know that at all. That's very interesting. That makes me. I mean, listen, not that YC means a lot, but it gives me a little bit more of a piece.
I talked about it on here pre-migration. I said, you know, the way they ran laps around Yuga on the Ordinals front, like, tells you what you need to know about him leveling up on the execution end.
Yeah.
I still think, you know, your idols eventually fall, right? And he needs to figure out a way to make DeGods and Utes not necessarily about him. At least not, you know, not the primary pitch point, at least.
I mean, I actually like he ended up hiring one of the relatively senior guys at a startup that I was previously invested in. So even though Frank himself is really young, it seems like he's at least, you know, gone through the length of surrounding himself with more experienced professionals to kind of shore up the execution front. You
Good.
know, honestly, like the fucking after movers and everything, that's not a bad thing to do.
No,
this point.
it's a very good thing to do. I think it's a very good thing to do. Okay, well, we should probably wrap up here. Why don't we let's go with our general goodbye when we talk about what we're looking forward to the week, if there's anything. Salty, I'm coming to you first since I haven't heard from you for a bit. What are you looking forward to this week?
And I'll tell you, in the next year, I'm looking forward to buying some NFTs again. I'm glad y'all keep up with it so much because I just get so bored with it now. So I'm glad there's still stuff going on, and I look forward to having this podcast where we can like talk about people that are crushing it, killing it,
Yes.
or at least doing pretty
Yes.
good, instead of being like, man, that's embarrassing. Well, let's talk about that story. Ooh, that's really embarrassing too. It just it's kind of a parade of amateur hours. Which was just as bad in the bull, you know, because then all the opportunists are back in full force too. But
Yes.
and what am I looking forward to this week? Dude, I'm pretty empty. Mostly macro stuff, keeping an eye on finance things that I'm sure Grant and Eric can talk more about, and figuring out how much stuff to sell or hold, and how long my time frames are.
Eric, what about you? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, oil is like up $8 a barrel in trading right now. I think that really is gonna be the focus next week. Where I said this many times on this podcast before. Like the one thing that gives me hesitation about the narrative that, hey, inflation is becoming more manageable over the course of the year is what energy costs are going to do. And what Russia and OPEC have done is basically on a headline basis remove 2 million barrels of supply from the market. That's not going to be a full 2 million barrels because they're probably benchmarking them to like production quotas that they're already underproducing on. But the message there is pretty clear. You've already have fracs showing in, forming in the anti-Russia alliance, where, Japan also today announced that they were basically going to buy Russian crude above the US mandated price cap. So I think on this front, it's going to get very, very interesting because the SPR has not been refilled. We're taking more supply off the market, and it's unclear that like you've actually had a substantial dent in demand. And this is where, if I were to kind of think about like the broader macro and try to get myself around, hey, inflation is going to moderate, Main Street is going to be okay, we can have the soft landing. Like the energy crisis is definitely something that I would seriously worry about.
Okay, that's good to know. Grant, what about you? What are you looking forward to this week?
Nothing specific, just kind of following along all the markets that I'm currently in. I think I've said this a couple podcasts in a row already, but yeah, kind of just waiting to see more pain in traditional markets. Couple indicators I'm looking at, outstanding credit card balances are at an all-time high. Surprise, surprise. Outside of like top 10, 20%, the American consumer is like really, really struggling. And according to some equity research professionals, household savings are likely kind of gone by mid 2023. So Q2, Q3 2023. Again, that's still kind of where I'm personally targeting some more pain in the traditional markets. And who knows what happens to this illiquid little clown show that we call crypto. But that's where I'm personally looking to kind of go a little bit more heavy and be more active in terms of participation. But obviously for now I'm happy to participate in some on-chain governance and some other fun games. Yeah.
Who else is gonna govern? But yeah, shit's getting really expensive. Like I tried to order Popeyes yesterday. It was $50 for like fucking Popeyes.
Was this for you or for your dog? Be honest.
No, this was one. I would never get away with feeding my dog Popeyes.
But you would eat Popeyes. You would never feed your
dog. I would eat trash, but not my dog.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, it was $50 for like.
That's everything's crazy expensive, but everything's still crowded, right? It's not like the Popeyes was empty.
No, it's. I there was just this. I think somebody on Twitter posted this menu. I found this really funny, but like, it was a truck stop diner menu, and under tater tots it said market price.
That is bougie.
Funk, real quick before you go, I feel like were we all not like a lot more bullish just like 2 episodes ago? I feel like when ETH was above 1800 for just a little while, or am I just making that up? I feel like
Well, no, I think that's what I was saying at the beginning. Like it feels we're in this weird, chaotic, weird world where no thing seems to last very long right now, right? Like we're
Yeah.
in this like very weird chop space, and what I was gonna say is the funny thing is what I'm looking forward to this week, and I know that everybody this is not really crypto related, but like I've been doing deep dives on the AI, AGI conversations around like, I don't know if you all saw that letter that was signed by Elon Musk and a bunch of people where they want everybody to spend 6 months, put 6 months pause on developing new AI language models because they believe we're getting close to an AGI too fast and we don't have the controls on it. And I was very much against that for a while. And over the last week or so, I've dove like kind of face first into all this information. And the one thing with all this shit we talk about, like there's a thing that could completely change the entire world. And when I mean the entire world, I do mean the entire world, especially from an economic and political standpoint, that could be coming online anytime between the next 2 to 20 years. And like that is something that when you fully comprehend what it means is game changing in so many ways. And it's really started to put my own life in perspective in a weird way. Like, I don't know how many of you have done this, but like, I definitely recommend you listen to, people have things they say about Lex Friedman and his podcast. I didn't really like it at first. I'm not a giant fan of Lex, but the last 2 episodes were Sam Altman from OpenAI. And then the next one, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he is like a big computer science researcher that's been doing 20 years of research and is convinced that we're going to die. Like he's now convinced that humanity is going to die.
Yeah, who's
and it was
that,
really
Sam
interesting.
Altman?
No, the second guy. So he did 2 podcasts back to back, and it's very much worth listening to. Sam Altman, which is one, he's the guy that runs OpenAI, that's responsible for ChatGPT, all the things that have come out. And there's another guy who is. Let me see if I can dig up his name real quick. Hold on, let me just find it while I'm talking about this. His name is. It's a strange name. Okay, Eliezer Yudkowsky.
Big Yud.
Eliezer
Big
Yudkowsky.
Yud.
Yes. No,
He's
you know
been
him.
saying
Yeah.
this for 3 decades, but
okay.
go.
Well, so he's now more convinced than ever that it's the end of times. But to hear those 2 back to back will give you a good perspective on where we are right now. And I am been a person who has been fundamentally. I am an optimist in general. I am also a person that tends to think things are going to happen in a much larger way, and then they kind of happen in like half as much as I think. I think what's going on right now with AI, everybody should be paying attention to, because I think it's something that's going to fundamentally change the life on Earth, which is pretty crazy to think about. I don't know if it's going to mean, I don't know if everybody's going to die, but I do think when we talk about macro markets, we talk about all this stuff, there's a legit pathway to another 10 to 20% of the world population losing their jobs in the next 2 to 5 years. And that is crazy when you think about all the stuff that Eric, you were just talking about, what kind of impact that could have, or Grant, you were talking about too, what kind of impact that could have on the economic system. It's going to be fascinating, I think.
I mean, if people haven't read like the Neuromancer saga by William Gibson, this is I strongly suggest you guys, people read it, because a lot of what he wrote about in the 80s with the Sprawl trilogy is very prescient, and what we're talking about with regards to like AI getting out of control is a big part of that, right?
Yep.
And so we're at some point, like, we might have like rogue super intelligent AI hiding out in the fringes of cyberspace, and a police force called the Turing Police dedicated to tracking down and destroying AI that achieves a certain level of sentience. Like, we're not that far off, and it's very, very scary.
Well, that's what, and I just wanted, people should just be aware, like, I spend my time trying to tell my own family, but like, anybody who listens to this should just listen to those 2 podcasts just to give yourself a sense of where we are. And I guarantee you we're farther along than you might think. Smart people out there really do believe that something in GPT-4 is showing some sort of sense of actual reasoning and logic. And, that's a big deal. So I'll leave everybody with that. We can go away with that. But we will see everybody next week. Thanks everybody for listening to us. We are Mid-Curve. Come listen to us on a regular basis. Please subscribe on all of the traditional podcast platforms. We have been threatening to do video at some point soon. Grant, how's your fitness regime coming along?
No comment.
Okay, it may not be that soon, but anyway, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us all.